have turned it off. So sorry for slide advancer. We have the off on the side. I'll be your slide advancer.
You're so proud we figured out how to use WebEx up here. We can't figure out a slide advancer. We are here to talk about toxics. So these are actually the contaminated sites around Bellingham Bay. Part 2 that will happen on March 17th will actually include some of the lane sites as well in that presentation. And so we're here to take a deeper look into these legacy contaminated sites. And so, next slide, please. Real quick about the WebEx. Thank you for joining us. We are now recording. We will stop recording at the end to allow for more questions. We also plan to host part 2, so again on March 17th. Same time, 6 to 8 p.m. That one is actually at the ecology building, field office. And so we are also going to host that one by WebEx. So we would love feedback from the WebEx folks. If it's not working for you, what can we do better? Maybe it's sound or something else, or from you folks too, if there's any feedback you have. We'll all be there in person, so anyone's welcome to show up. But we're just planning ahead because things are constantly evolving. Like last Friday, we thought we were good to go, and then late on Monday, we decided we should try the WebEx version, and so we posted it out this morning. So we're just trying to cover all our bases. Now there have been confirmed cases in Whatcom and County, so we might expect to see more restrictions in the future. And we also want to accommodate those who might want to be protected of themselves or other people that are surrounded by. So we would love to not be part of the problem, and but still offer educational opportunities for folks. So expect more emails to come out with the details for the part 2 next week. And for those of you on the WebEx, if you want to send me an email, my email is there. It's eleanorh@re-sources.org, and I can send you additional information from this meeting, some of the handouts that the folks here got, as well as if anyone has questions afterwards, you're welcome to reach out to me for any reason. Next slide, please.
Trying. There we go.
All right. So I guess, can everyone see the screen okay? Because I can turn down the lights a little bit. So we already did introductions. We're going to talk a little bit about what is the Model Toxic Control Act, oftentimes referred to as just Mott-cuh for the abbreviation. And we'll also talk a little bit about the public participation along the way, these orange bubbles that you'll see in later slides. We'll talk a little bit about some of the commonly used terms. And again, if anyone has questions along the way, please feel free to jump in. We'll talk about, or then we'll transition into an exercise. So you guys will, Ian will run you through an exercise where you guys will be junior managers, where you'll get a scenario where you have a site and there's contamination, and you can see where the contamination is, and then you try to pick and choose what, how you're going to get it cleaned up. To hopefully help you guys understand kind of what goes into the process. And then we'll do a recap and some of the stuff to expect coming up in part 2. And then we also have that survey that we crossed out to folks we would love for you to take so that we can improve upon our process. And then for next week, we are offering the WebEx option, like I mentioned. We will do a quick recap of part 1, so what we covered today, to hopefully refresh you guys, but also help other folks get up to speed in case they missed this one. We'll take a deeper dive into the cleanup, giving some examples of some of the commonly found contaminants, how some of those contaminants might be cleaned up. And then talk about other things like how they determine what cleanup action is actually going to be the one that they use. And Then we'll also talk about how you can effectively make your voice heard and make an effective public comment. And any lingering questions or anything else you want to learn about, you might have some opportunity to have some open space for that depending on how long it takes to get through the other stuff. And then we'll take a survey and any feedback on what else there's next steps. If you guys loved it and you want a part 3 on this other piece that we didn't cover or something like that, we can discuss that part. Yes, so that one is not here in the Department of Ecology, and it's also available in the web.
Yeah, one of the benefits of WebEx is you can be in your pajamas with a cup of tea,
yes,
if you wish. Actually, you're fine in my opinion, pajamas at any time.
Yes.
So.
Okay, so the Model Texas Control Act has actually been around for, I guess, 31 years, 33 years as of last year. So in 1988, it was a citizens initiative that was passed. It was passed because Washington State residents realized that the 2% wasn't enough. They wanted stronger legislative authority and more stable funding. There were some 2% sites that weren't getting cleaned up fast enough. Superfund is, so that's on the federal level. It's Mott-cuh has a lot of similarities with Superfund, except for one's at the state level and one's at the national level. Anything to add on that?
So the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, they will regulate on a federal level their law that's similar to Mott-cuh, the Model Control Act, is CERCLA. Going to struggle getting the CERCLA Act correct. But basically, it's their environmental law at the federal level. So if you think in terms of Mott-cuh and state of Washington, federal.
Okay. For those on WebEx, the question was, what is Superfund? Sorry. So the provisions in the Model Texas Control Act were based on stringent scientific standards that are all based on protecting both human and environmental health. And so one of the interesting things is that we have about 13,000 sites currently listed under Mott-cuh, and there are about 300 additional sites that are added each year. So that's a lot of sites. When they first came out with Mott-cuh, they thought by now, long before now, they would have had all the sites cleaned up. But it turns out that there were a lot more sites out there than they ever anticipated at the time of the creation. And so, yeah. So the question for those on WebEx was, is this just in Washington State? And yes, so those 13,000 sites are just in Washington State alone, with 300 new ones added in our state every year.
So just as a kind of a side note of something I've learned interesting, some of our staff now that are near their retirement into their careers, here 30 years ago, this law went into action. So they originally were around. The school of thought was Mott-cuh Act will be in place and get things cleaned up really quick. It's been our staff's career so far working towards that end. So the logic of what they thought that they could accomplish has changed as they learned. And side note of what CERCLA means, as I had mentioned that verbally, benefit of Google, Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability. Similar in its function to state law. I'm sorry for folks on the phone that are getting this pause. We're having trouble getting from slide to slide. There we go.
Okay. So there are some common definitions that are used throughout this, and this is something that we can email out to. So as long as I have your email, I can pass it on to you. The link gives you some of the cleanup acronyms too. It's about 30 pages long, and so instead of also handy on the computer because you can use the search function too instead of flipping through 30 pages of paper. But that might be handy for folks as you look through other documents in the future, like what does PLC stand for again? What does Circle S stand for?
Yep.
Stuff like that. Next slide. So something else that I wanted to mention, kind of along the lines of Mott-cuh has been around for 30 years, and we have so many sites and way more sites that are being added than taken off, and so it's a much slower process than anticipated. So actually right now, the Mott-cuh is undergoing a rulemaking update, and so a lot of what they're trying to focus on is how can we make things a lot more efficient, while also achieving the same result of having a cleaned up site that meets all the Mott-cuh standards, that we feel safe and confident that both humans and the environment are protected. So I'm actually on that, it's the Mott-cuh STAG, or Model Toxic Control Act Stakeholder and Tribal Advisory Group. And we meet periodically, and I think that this is actually going to be something like a 7-year process. We're just starting in that process, but they're doing section by section and chunk by chunk so that they don't have to put a huge, thick, I think the whole roll taking right now, or the whole roll right now is like several, it's at least like 2 inches thick or something like that. It's pretty thick, and so to put that all out there at once for people to comment on seems like a little bit much, and so they're trying to systematically go through it. And so it's been a really interesting process, and if anyone is interested in learning more about that, let me know. Also, if you Google MTCA or Mott-cuh and STAG, you should be able to find, I can also put this out here, there's a website that has all of the stuff in there that folks are welcome to follow along on too. If you want to stay updated on stuff. Okay. So what we're going to start diving into here is the Mott-cuh process. So some of you, those who are here, they'll have this handout with the basic protocol with the different steps, and so we will walk you through all those steps. But one thing to note is that on those handouts, where there's the orange bubbles, that means that there's a public comment period at that point along the way. And so those are something that you might want to pay more attention to because it's a chance for you guys to have your voice heard. And then there's also some links to some of the ecology resources where you can find out more information. And I think on the we also have another handout too that has Bellingham Bay cleanup sites, and I can email these to folks on the WebEx too if I get your email. So this has a list of all of the different sites and what their current status is, so you can see what their where they are in the process too. So if you're curious, like how far along different sites are, you can find that there. You can also find it online. There's a handy link right there too that can help take you there. But one thing that I would caution about this is a really handy thing, but these sites keep on changing, and which is exciting because they're moving forward in the process. So just know that what it says now might not be true 6 months from now. They might be further along in the process. So you can always check that online. So it's always difficult. I don't envy Ian trying to put public documents out there that are useful for people that are then outdated.
Yeah, that's
not too much.
It's totally accurate the moment it's printed, and then it becomes inaccurate every moment after. But that's good news because there's cleanup being done, and that would be the reason it would change. And if there is no change for that site, then there's nothing to change in that in the fact sheet either.
Are any of them today or walking through their Superfund site up here? Closure. Closure, it's where Bellingham Technical College. Okay. Welcome. Yes. Wood treatment plant. That's
Our Squalicum Creek, the Eldridge Municipal Landfill site, which is where Squalicum Creek comes out into Bellingham Bay. That area was cleaned up in tandem with EPA. It was coordinated, and how some of those cleanup efforts work. So yeah, there's definitely on here. We're trying.
All of a sudden it's going to like relax their own flag.
Aha.
So this is another graphic showing that cleanup process that Kristen will actually run you guys through in just a moment. So some of the things to note on here, again, the public participation. There's also legal agreements we'll talk about throughout the process, and then interim actions are things that we'll also talk about, but those can happen. So these three things can happen anywhere throughout that whole process. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, and for folks that are here in the room and online too, it's some of the same information, just made a little bit differently. Simplified, you might see the graphic in front of you right now, the stair step, like in a fact sheet, highlighting where we are in the cleanup process. The full page thing just has a bit more details. Try to keep the color coding and branding similar across the board so you can kind of follow all the different pieces of outreach that we have.
So yeah, I was gonna just go over the different steps that are involved so you get an idea of what these titles mean, like what does remedial investigation mean, what does engineering design mean, so that when we do have tours or there are comment periods opening, you'll understand what actually the comment is for and about. And just to give you an idea too of the process. Each one of these steps is pretty involved and it can be pretty overwhelming at first. But if we look at the individual processes, it really does make sense. So it's kind of nice to look at them individually. So as you can imagine, the first thing to happen is site discovery. And that means that somebody discovered that there are contaminants in the soil. And this really can be as simple as somebody playing frisbee in a park and slipping on some fossil fuel, a slippery sheen. And like, what's that about? Or it could be someone doing some excavator work and they hit an underground storage tank that used to hold a petroleum product. Or it could be like, oh yeah, we know there used to be a gas station there. We're sure that that soil is contaminated. So historical knowledge will tell us that. These site discoveries come from all different people and places. Our record keeping from the past isn't always there for us to just be able to look up somewhere. So it is kind of having people observe on the ground conditions. So we see someone finds a spill or suspects one, and then somehow that message gets to the Department of Ecology. And the Department of Ecology, is the organization, the government organization that oversees the Mott-cuh process. Then we want to find out if the contaminants present, are they at the levels that will trigger this whole process? Like maybe that sheen of oil is, oh, maybe someone just spilled a little bit of fossil fuel, they're mowing their lawn or something like that, and there's just a little bit of a spill, dig it up, clean it, dispose of it, done. So the idea is we want to investigate how extensive is this contamination. Is it enough to trigger this whole process? At this stage, if it is a very small cleanup, if the owner of the site can remove it and it can be assured that it hasn't spread or it's not very extensive, then done. We're done with that and we can move on to a different site. It never enters that Mott-cuh title or that hazardous site title. But then if it is contaminated enough, it becomes confirmed and suspected contaminated site list. It is added to that list, and then that triggers this process. So here's one of the words that's embedded in your handout there, the interim action. These can happen at any time. Say there was some fossil fuels that were spotted, and they're spotted really close to a playground, or they're spotted really close to the water's edge. They're basically imminent danger to the environment or to the health of somebody. So we need to remove them, not years, but in days or hours, as soon as we possibly can. So interim actions are kind of emergency actions to clean up sites so that they don't pose an imminent threat to a child playing or the fish in the water or any type of organism in the water. So these can happen again. They can happen at the very beginning. They can happen later on because imminent threats can be triggered by like high tide or something, a storm event. Boulevard Park after a storm, and I think it's 2017. Big high tide and big storm swell exposed all this debris, this kind of landfill that had been used to fill the land. It exposed it, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, it's about to go out to sea, so we had to quickly do an interim action to clean that up. Yeah. And so what also happens in those interim actions is often it's not just cleaned up, but it's there's structures added or other pieces added to that so that it can't erode further or it prevents people from being able to touch it. So it's not always just removal. It can be other types of remedies. Yeah, that's a public comment one too, right? So then what happens is there's an assessment done to basically say, how hazardous is it? And there's a scaling system that puts it into the records, and it basically is a way of determining the order of when these cleanups will be addressed. So the ones that are more hazardous potentially could be then cleaned up earlier. But they will then make it onto this hazard site. This is a link that we don't need to click now, but it is updated very regularly. So I looked at the new one, it was from February, and I noticed it has just all of the sites in Washington State that are on that hazardous list. But what's also interesting, it tells you like the new ones that have been added and the ones that have been removed because they're all cleaned up. So it's just a way of tracking which ones are added over time. And it's done by county, so you can look like it was in county. And then this, I love this website. This is in What's My Neighborhood. And this is a map of all of those 13,000 sites on Washington State. And you can open it or you can zoom in and literally find out what's in your neighborhood. And it's awesome because you click on the dot and it will open up and give you the links to exactly what it is and all that stuff. It's a really helpful visual and just a really neat tool because I think it's nice to know what's just right around here. And there's a lot of little sites around here as well, so it's very interesting. And then the agreed order, these are the legal agreements that define the cleanup steps required after it's made the site hazardous assessment list, and it basically identifies who is responsible for what. That's the really important part. So who's going to be footing the bill, so to speak, and who's going to be organizing what elements of the cleanup. It's often a multi-agency effort, so it's not just one entity that is doing the cleanup effort, that there's cooperation between different agencies. So this will clearly define whose job is what.
It also defines when. So there's a schedule that's usually attached to this and a scope of work. So it defines who's responsible for what exactly they'll be doing, and that is due for completion, ready for ecology and for you all.
And then oftentimes we like the public comment associated with this, and sometimes it's, I think the initial one, like maybe most important, but a lot of times it's just we have to update the timeline or we found new information, and so they just need to make sure that agreement
Yeah, that's totally spot on. So when a new agreed order, legal agreement comes out, that triggers a public comment period. When there's any amendment, change to that, so they'll add on more work to be done, and it locks in what that schedule is going to look like. When those amendments happen, that also goes out for.
Yeah, I've also seen some of the comment periods will actually have multiple things that you can comment on. So it might be the remedial investigation and also the agreed order. So it's just so when there are these public comment periods, it's good to know like all the different things that you can comment on.
The goal is not to inundate as far as things to review, but it's also to be responsible for your time our service for the public. So we open up a public comment period, we get multiple interactions going at the same time versus spreading it out and taking just more time of everyone's time to do that, and it slows the cleanup process down. We want the cleanup process to be open and transparent, but we want it to be clean too. So that's all of our goal, same goal, clean up. We try to be judicious that way with packaging.
PLPs, potentially liable parties. So these are the folks that are responsible for paying for the cleanup. And this can be tricky. It's not always who actually is responsible for contaminating the land. And it sometimes is. So if there is a old gas station and they left behind a lot of fossil fuels, it's often that gas station and that corporation that's responsible for putting the bill for that. Other times, like the Georgia Pacific example, which is the biggest of the cleanup efforts in Bellingham, when Georgia Pacific sold that tract of land to the Port of Bellingham, a part of that agreement was that they wouldn't have to pay. They would not be a potential liable partner. So that was a part of that transaction, is they eliminated themselves for having this liability. And it was then put into the port's hands. And I don't know if it's city too, or if it's just the port and the port bought it.
So some of the larger Georgia Pacific sites that would have been part of their land ownership and operation, some of those sites do have city responsibilities on that. Specifically for what ecology calls our Georgia Pacific West site, or is.
So it varies case by case, and it can change. Again, just I use that Georgia Pacific one because it's our biggest cleanup and it's one of the more interesting and complex ones as well. So the remedial investigation and feasibility study. Technically, these are two steps, but they are generally done together. Not always, but generally. So that remedial investigation, as you can imagine, just based on that word, that's when scientists go out and are testing the soil to determine what the contaminants are, how widespread they are, and how far they go. What are the boundaries to those contaminations? Not only just outward, but also in depth. So is it in the groundwater? Is it in, how deep in the sediment is it, or in the soil? And then did it go into the marine sediment? So that remedial investigation can take quite a long time because they'll do their preliminary tests, and based on those preliminary tests, they'll be like, well, these areas are still really concentrated. We need to go farther and test more. And then based on those results, they might have to go more. So this can take a few years just to get that boundary of where the contamination lies, because they want to make sure that they're getting all, or at least most of it, documented. So the scientific studies characterize how far the contamination is, how far it travels, how far it might travel in the future, and then what cleanup options would be sufficient to address the contamination. They also try to track what contaminant goes to what industry, like former industry. What was the cause of it? Because there can be multiple liable parties, and they can also determine the boundaries of the cleanup sites themselves. So they can say, well, this dioxin came from here, so it's going to be a part of that cleanup site. These PCBs came from this source, so it's going to be a part of that. So it helps to find the boundaries between our 12 different cleanup sites. Sometimes they overlap so much that scientists decide, well, you know what? They're so intertwined. How about we just clean them up all together and make it into one cleanup site? So that happens as well. It's not always a clear-cut line between these different sites, particularly when they're so close together. So then the feasibility study, then, now that the contamination is defined and we know how far spread it is, well, how are we going to clean it up? What are some of the ideas about cleaning it up? What is the feasibility of it? And this last part, identify future uses of the site and match accordingly with the appropriate cleanup standards. What that means is we need to know what we're going to use this property for. Is this property going to be a playground? So is it the potential for children to be eating the soil? Is this property going to remain as an industrial property? So people will be wearing clothes, they'll be wearing usually industrial equipment, at least minimum they'll have shoes on, right, and fully clothed. They're not going to be barefoot in their bathing suits or eating the soil. So those two levels are very different with the standards that we have to clean up based on the Model Toxic Cleanup Act process. Often, though, I've noticed just in my experience working with them, even if a site is to remain industrial or commercial, they often actually even go with the more strict cleanup standards just to be safe. So it's just something I've seen in the past. But understanding what you're going to use that land for after the cleanup is really important to determine how you're going to clean it up. So this another PAC, or Proposed Alternative Cleanup. Basically what happens is that consultants will provide a variety of alternatives to clean up that tract of land, that cleanup site. And all of those cleanups meet the minimum requirements for the health of human beings and marine organisms. So they all meet that minimum requirement. But they all have different ways of cleaning up and different, basically different ways of cleaning up and different quantities of generally soil removal or different types of capping. So the amount of effort that goes into the cleaning up based on, not based on, but just varying, I'm just saying this right.
Usually there's like,
next slide.
A bunch of different,
Yeah, can you go to the next slide? I'm trying to explain the slide. There we go.
Looking at a variety of ways to clean it up.
Yeah. So what we have here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different alternatives. Okay, and again, they're all meeting these basic minimum requirements. And we rate each of those cleanup efforts based on how protective they are of the environment and the marine organisms and human health, the permanence. So how long will they last? Right? You could do a really good job, but then the first storm comes in and wipe it out. The long-term effectiveness, short-term risk management, implementability, technical and administrative, consideration of public concerns, cost, not weighted but used to evaluate each remedial alternative to its cost. So we're basically put these into the graph and then we do compare it to how much the cost is, and we get then what's called a disproportionate cost analysis. So based on the effort that goes into it and how much it costs, we come up with what's considered a preferred alternative, the one that gives the best protection for the best cost.
We're just going to go over that in more detail in part 2, so we are going to talk a little bit more about remedies and different concepts. So I feel like this is a really important thing, and it's also interesting with the office guide with the rulemaking update too, and trying to figure out better ways to incorporate things like climate change and environmental justice into all of this.
In our activity later tonight, you get a chance to pick an alternative, what you would think is preferred, and you'll simply see why you take that one.
Okay, so step 4 then is the cleanup action plan. And this is confusing because the acronym is CAP, which is a type of a cleanup, but only one type. So this cleanup action plan, it's I would call it like the outline or the overview of how it's going to be cleaned up, not the technical nitty-gritty details of how it's cleaned up, but it's what alternatives did we choose based on the remedial investigation and feasibility study, and it'll provide some maps and documents of the extent of the cleanup as well. It'll give a timeline. It'll remind people of what the PLPs, the potential liable parties, are. So it's basically, okay, we've decided what the alternative is, and this is our overall plan for the cleanup. And then after that then we go into the engineering document. Design. And this then is the technical document to say exactly how the cleanup is going to be done. So, for example, if we're going to be removing soil, what's the estimate amount of soil that's going to be removed? Do we have to wait till low tide? Do we have to dewater the area before we move that soil or sediment? And then what do we do with that soil when we have it? Is it going to be put on a barge? Is it going to be put on a truck? And then how is it going to be taken to those hazardous waste sites that exist on the east side of the mountain? So that's the type of information that goes into these more, this more detailed design of how the cleanup will happen.
And public does actually do that because the comment period is no. So typically during the cleanup action plan, there is potential to comment there. I think it was for the Cornwall Avenue site, or that there was an opportunity for the public to comment on the engineering design because there was such an interest. But ecology made the decision to respond to people's comments from earlier in the process to also open up public comment during that period.
So you're absolutely right. No, the distinction of when you see like little comment bubbles on certain steps, those are required. So those are at a minimum, we'll do that, but there's always opportunity that you can do more public outreach and open comment periods for other steps. The engineering design phase, that step is that's an interesting one. In the case of the Cornwall Avenue landfill, ecology as well as the city, I decided that it had been a while since the use had happened for the site, so there had been time that had transpired and there had been work that had been going and doing and ready to share what that looked like. So they wanted to make that available to comment on. So there were some reasons for that right there. In for other sites that go through that step, if it's something that is ecology-led cleanup, we always, as ecology, will regulate these cleanups. But it's the responsibility of the other parties to do that cleanups, and they often hire consultants to do that work. And they're doing that work. Mott-cuh does not require that at the engineering design phase that we do a public comment period. So it can happen, not necessarily required in those cases. And part of the logic of what I have learned from other folks within ecology is you will see at that step of the cleanup, the type of work that we're putting in front of you is something that a skilled professional would be taking out to the field. It's schematics, it's engineered drawing. It's quite refined and quite detailed. We have a very educated public that can also understand that too. Definitely not implying any of that, but it's a different sort of document that's in front of you to review. And at that point, there's a lot of, every step before that has helped inform that. There's been a lot of public input and a lot of energy put in to get there.
Something that I wanted to quickly ask you is that we're talking about the Washington State formal cleanup process. This is when ecology has a lot of oversight, and so the Bellingham Bay site, there's a lot of the entities talking about the governmental. There's like the port of Bellingham, the city of Bellingham, and so ecology. So we're dealing with more public entities for these cleanups, but there's also another separate cleanup, I believe it's called independent cleanup, and they are usually led by more of a private entity, the potential liability party that then can choose to have a little bit more or less oversight from the preferred if they want a lot of help to get through it, then they're there to provide that help, and they know what exactly they're doing, and they get us how to get through it, but they can do that a little bit further out.
Yeah, the independent cleanup process, folks can choose to enter in the voluntary cleanup program. There's a portion of the program that I work with, toxic cleanup program. And our staff that are supervising that can provide technical assistance, and they can also provide the advisement on management to get through to all. So yeah, people can enter in that process. Also wanted to mention for this engineering design phase, if there's not a public comment period, the documents will still be publicly available to view. We share those through our websites. People, they need a physical copy of sorts, can always contact ecology. They'll always be available. It's a public document. And some other things that go on during this stage that you don't necessarily see because it's not tied to a comment period. They're working on getting their permits during this time. So, like with Kirsten's example, you know, some of the or the city, in the case of Bellingham, they would be securing what, as an agency doing the construction work, they would have to get permits from other agencies, like the Army Corps of Engineers for natural resources, Washington Fish and Wildlife. They have to make sure they've got everything else squared away, I's dotted, T's crossed to do this. And ecology's management is just parallel and with the other management of the other agencies. Hooray!
Yeah. So that's basically taking an engineering design and so ecology works with those liable parties, clean it up, and remove the sources of pollution in their pathways of exposure. So that remove sources of pollution is an interesting one because sometimes it's very easy to see what the source of pollution is, but there can also be like stormwater issues where, you know, what's upstream. There could be that site. We don't want to spend all this time cleaning it up when there's another potential source of pollution, you know, upstream, so to speak, or uphill. So that can be a little tricky at times to really be aware of all the potential places where recontamination are. So again, these projects are extremely expensive to do, and so we want to keep them clean. Also, the pathways of exposure, because sometimes in the cleanup action plan, they choose to leave some contaminants in place, and so they cap them with clean soil. So making sure that those caps are thick enough and will do their job and also will last as well. Part of that. So when you talk about cleaning up, it's not always just removal. Sometimes it is just removing the exposure potential between whatever that is. So then after it is cleaned up, it's important to keep monitoring it, making sure that the contaminants were removed and that there isn't any contamination occurring or the transport of contamination within the soil is not happening or happening. So they're monitored for at least 5 years. And some of the things that they do as well is they put these activities on sites that are restricted or prohibited that might disturb the cleanup. So, for example, if the Port of Bellingham owns, which they do, that's the Georgia Pacific site, if they want to allow someone to build a condominium on that site, when that builder goes to build it, they are going to be given a list of restrictions that they can or cannot do based on how that land was cleaned up. So if there, for example, was a cap that was put on that was 5 feet, well, what if they want to build a garage that's 20 feet underground? Will they let them do that? So that's the type of thing that needs to be written down and talked about and also communicated between different land users or developers in perpetuity. Because we don't want these exposure passageways to be opened up if there's that loss of knowledge given. It also could be signage, like, you know, don't go in this area. For some reason, we couldn't clean this area up. Or there's a variety of different ways that we need to respect the cleanup process of the land that was done to it. Yeah, so it could be some more design as well.
Are there already Are there already permits out there?
That was kind of a real example.
Okay. I know what you can talk about.
Yeah,
I don't know if you
and that's kind of in the works right now, and I honestly don't know where it is right now, but that's one of the issues that they want to put out on garage going around in this area.
What?
But yeah, it's full fill too, so that's another, these toxic cleanup sites in Bellingham Bay, and most of them are within fill. That used to be mud flats that we then filled in with various materials, whether it was waste from the timber industry, bricks from the hotel, or land waste. A lot of it's garbage. So it's a variety of stuff that's been put there. So that has to be taken into account.
interesting dynamic on development. So say the example on Georgia Pacific website, and they would want to dig down in. You know, keeping worker safety and the eventual user of that site safety in mind, potentially it seems like they would need to go down into the surface and deal with something that has contamination. The developer, in order to gain that use of the site below ground, potentially, I don't know all the details, say to get down deep, you have to remove the soil. To get down, you have to dig down. Well, that soil would have to be dealt with safely. It could be actually needed to be moved to a permitted hazardous waste landfill. That's a very expensive option. But when somebody has a plan to use this land and develop it, they often will be willing to take that financial responsibility to clean it up in a more protective way, whether we need more of that contamination or the end goal. The trick is they have to do that within the boundaries of what is safe. That goes through ecology regulation. So it's not always necessarily a bad thing when those things happen, because somebody else is willing to go for more protective, removing more contamination. In some cases it can work.
Yeah. That's newer fill though. Yeah, that's still bellwether charge. It wasn't industry.
You can see some of the pictures of squaws that were being created from when there was operations of the landfill at the Central Waterfront site. So contaminated site, Central Waterfront, and fringes of the aerial photographs, a new harbor being dredged and created from clean material. Yeah.
Then, so 5-year periodic review happens to ensure cleanup standards are met. So 5 years after the cleanup occurs, there'll be an extensive review that goes through. And then if it has met all the requirements, it could be removed from that hazard item. But that doesn't mean that the monitoring will stop. From what I learned, these sites are all basically monitored in perpetuity. They might just not be monitored often. But people will have their eyes on them forever, really, just to make sure that they're maintaining their integrity.
This is the moment for public comment as well. So when that 5-year periodic review goes out, it also is accompanied with the opportunity to comment on that document. Then if a site is removed from the hazardous sites list, that is also a trigger for a comment period too. That's some of the best news right there. That's a fun one to be able to do outreach for, is you've got a site that's clean and we're telling you about it. So, yeah.
So one of the commonly asked questions when it comes to the sites is, so where does the funding come from? And so I would start with, it really depends on the site. If you have any questions about any specific sites, I'm sure that we can try to find answers for those specific sites. A lot of the sites here have the Port of Bellingham and the City of Bellingham involved, and so they are, in most cases, I believe, eligible for recouping up to 50% of those costs through other funding mechanisms. A lot of the funding for the Mott-cuh cleanup, or the Mott-cuh funding, comes from a hazardous substance tax on things like petroleum products, pesticides, and other chemicals, with the idea that, those are things that were hazardous substances that we're using now. We can't go back in time and necessarily make all the people who use hazardous substances that then led to these legacy contaminated sites. We can't always make them pay for it, but at least the people that are currently using them, with the idea that at least they can pay for what happened and help cover the cost of what happened in the past. If they hopefully are, there's a lot better practices now, so hopefully they won't create any of these legacy contaminated sites, but it just seems like the appropriate place to place that tax. Funding also comes from recovering penalties or requiring the polluters to pay for the cleanup with ecology oversight. And so some of the reason that Mott-cuh came about was that Washington state residents really wanted to make sure that the splitters were being held responsible and it wasn't just up at the super fund level. So that was another impetus. Or do you have anything to add?
Only thing to kind of add, an interesting observation of state law, Model Toxic Control Act, Mott-cuh, has regulatory authority. It has this clearly defined pathway to cleaning up sites. It also created a funding mechanism to self-fund that cleanup process. And funding in and of itself supports public agencies. It's the legacy contamination before current regulations could, in cases, cause that contamination. Like before landfill has current regulations, landfills, some of Bellingham Bay, cause contamination. Our current municipalities wouldn't, they're not today, and they wouldn't be going forward to manage a landfill that way. But they're still the agency that is responsible for cleaning it up. So this funding that supports these public agencies, supports their cleaning up, it supports the community tax bases, our community, gives them a way to be able to deal with the current cleanup now for a past action. So it's kind of an interesting way to help support getting this going.
Are companies like
Into the tax.
because it's showing fraud in other stuff. Do they?
So when we all, what we see for a price of used oil, buy a petroleum product, we got the gas pump. Some of those taxes, Mott-cuh tax is a portion of that, but also the tax of the companies that are generating this and their profits is a portion of the tax that comes at that point, as I understand it as well. And in some sites, they're even a potentially liable party for the operation of cleaning up part of the contamination. Some sites too. That's different from profit funding, but there's also that interaction in the whole process.
So public participation is something that we've kind of hit on throughout this. And then part two, we'll go over some examples and talk a little bit more about how to make an effective comment, because sometimes there are certain types of comments that have more effect than others in the outcomes, and so we like to help you guys understand that a little bit more. But with that said, please always feel free to make whatever comment you want when there's an open public comment period. Don't be scared because you think that, it's not going to make a difference. So please make that comment. There are several areas that we talked about. All of the orange little speech bubbles on that handout are all areas where ecology has to provide public comment or public comment periods. I'll also talk about some of the ways that you can keep up to speed with when those are coming out, because you might not know about some of the ones that have happened already and might want to know when some of the ones are coming up. Something else that I would note is that so during all of these public comment periods, there's also the capacity for ecology to host public meetings. Oftentimes, resources also works with ecology during this public comments to host a tour of those sites, so that our hope is that we can get people to those sites and really understand what's going on at the site with some of the site managers. So maybe the port might be there, and they might talk about the potential future uses of that site and some of the past history of it as one example. And ecology might be able to talk a little bit more about some of the cleanup processes that might happen or something like that. But ecology doesn't always schedule those public meetings if they think that there's not enough public interest to make sure that they put their effort where it's going to be most effective. But if you see a public comment period that's open and you really want want a public meeting, all it takes is 10 people or more to request a public meeting, and they'll make that happen. And so public participation is a big part of Mott-cuh as a citizens initiative. They felt like citizens should have a part in the whole cleanup process. One thing to note is that as we get further down through this process, it gets harder and harder to make big changes. So think about, if you're planning on redoing your kitchen, on day one, if you decide you want something, your floor done in a certain way, maybe that's possible, but, after they start laying down the tile and all of a sudden you decide you want a wooden floor instead, it's a little bit harder and more expensive to change those things. So that's why we try to encourage folks to engage early on in the process. It's really frustrating once you get to the cleanup action plan. You wanted a different alternative that was presented in the feasibility study, and maybe you had good reason for it, but that time period has really passed, and so you're kind of stuck with what's in that cleanup action plan sometimes. But again, like what I said earlier, please feel free to make whatever comments your heart desires. Don't hold back, but it's just something to keep in mind throughout that whole process. And something that we also want to make sure that everyone understands, we've noticed with doing the tours, we really value having ecology and other staff there because then the public gets to interact with them because they really know a lot about this, and we really encourage you to reach out to them. They're pretty friendly people. You can see Ian here doesn't have horns or anything.
You can't tell on the online right now, but I'm smiling.
Yes, he's smiling, very nice, happy person. And he's more than happy to talk to you too. So feel free to reach out to staff at any point.
I just want to say, like that last point, there's an open start and finish time to a formal comment being submitted, but if you have a question outside of that, call us. It's more rare than I would like it to be to actually have some interaction, because if I can't answer the question, I could try to help get an answer to it. And the more that we have that open dialogue, the next time that we get to a point of outreach, I'll be better, know how we can do a better service. The type of questions addressed at one time, because we've had a couple of questions. That's helpful for me. And to reiterate Eleanor's point on that, if 10 or more people request a meeting, we haven't all automatically scheduled something. Folks really want a meeting. It is really helpful earlier than later to let us know.
Don't ask them.
You can. I mean, on the 29th day, you can request a meeting. What that inevitably does is the comment period then closes. We can't turn around fast enough to let everybody know and schedule that meeting. That the comment period closes, and we have had a case where we had tried to schedule a meeting. It took a while to get on everyone's calendars, get a venue, get all that stuff coordinated, and reach out to the public with a postcard notice, newspaper ads, those regular outreach we do to let people know about that meeting. That just meant that there was about another month or so we could get to the meeting, open up another comment period for you to comment based on that new information coming to a meeting. That little bit longer process administratively to provide the input that asked for just took a little longer, which meant it took a little longer to keep that process moving along. If it was needed and the information was requested, we wanted to make sure that we get it there. If the request had come in like day 2, we could have done that quicker and still provided the information that everyone wanted. So it helps if possible.
Sometimes you don't find out that there's public comment period until day 28.
Some folks may not. The wide net we cast can work, and yeah, it happens sometimes that way too. So.
Yeah, that's usually when it's Yeah, that would be a good time to look into it and see what is available. There's also, real quick, maybe go to about it. So there are several ways to stay informed. One way is to get onto Eden Valley's outreach, or you can say outreach specialist, like get onto his email notice list. What's the best way for folks to do that?
So just send me an email. If you end up going to the web link there, the Bellingham Bay cleanup, on that page now, there's a link that you can select to get signed up for that email list. It emails you. So either direction. So just shoot me an email. I have your email address when you do that, so it's easier to, like transcribing and misinterpretation there. I'll just add you to the list. I may just reach back out to see what site or sites plural that you might be interested in, because anything Bellingham Bay or anything Whatcom County related, I can email. If we have an update, or if you're very specifically interested in the South State Street site, just Georgia Pacific West, I can just focus to you too. So your choice.
Yeah. So those are all great ways. So email, I find to be the handiest because it's kind of, I don't have to be checking the website, which is another way. So you can check the website if you want to go back one. The other thing that I would add to that too is that Ecology does send out mailers, like physical mailers. And so that's usually based on the geographic area. So if you're within a certain area that might be impacted by that cleanup, you should be getting something in the mail in regards to that. So one way that folks can sort of follow this online if you want to. So if you go to that the Bellingham Bay that homepage that shows all of the different sites, you can then, if you go to that page, you can then click on any of those sites, and they will have lots of information, up-to-date information about those sites.
So for our WebEx viewers right now, just want to do a quick check-in on what you can see when I switch pages like that. So let's unmute everybody here. Gaia, can you see the Bellingham Bay webpage right now?
No, but it was in a link in an email I was sent, so I can get onto it on my phone or my computer.
Here, I will switch over pages real quick. You can see it. I just needed to know if I needed to stop PowerPoint. I did. So now, on your screen, can you see our webpage?
Yes.
Okay, good.
So if you scroll down and then click on one of the sites to go to one of their pages.
One that you had showed, Central Waterfront, there. So each of these, like accordion little breakdown things, you can go to the web page, you can see the most recent fact sheet. That's what Eleanor had referred that comes in the mail. By signing up for the email list, you get a digital copy of that fact sheet. So same thing that would go in the mail. But by going to a web page, it has a lot more there too.
Yeah, so you can find all of these details. What I really appreciate is that over in the far right-hand side, there's a section that has contact. So if you ever have any questions for that site, you can get the contact information and reach out to those folks there. For this one. The other thing that I think is really valuable for folks to know is that under site information on the far right-hand side, there's view electronic documents. So you can click on that, and then it shows you probably more than you ever wanted to know. But it has all of these things categorized. So there's legal documents, public information stuff, and technical reports. And so if you say are looking at the cleanup action plan and you're like, I wonder what was in the RFS or the Remedial Investigation Feasibility Study, then you can look at this and find that there, or you just maybe you can't find the fact sheet somewhere else. You could probably find the fact sheet in there somewhere of some of the other stuff too. So it's a really valuable, I think, resource for folks to know about, because there's lots of documents there, but I know it took me a long time to figure out where it all was. But once you find it, it's great.
And what I try to help with on some of these pages that I manage is if there's anything recent, I try to put it up in the current status, linking to the same document, library page, if you want to think about it. But as you go through, learn and read about this site, some of the key documents really highlight the key steps. Same thing, those documents are in that library repository location. So it just depends on how you want to navigate to get there.
There's more than one way to get there, so
yep.
Chances are you'll find it.
And if you need a guide, you have my phone number. So I'm happy to walk you through that.
I guess I would maybe, one last thing that I did want to note is that something that I feel like a lot of folks get and each step of the way has a lot of stuff that goes into it. So by nature, it just takes a while. And we want to make sure that it's done well because we don't want to clean up a site and then right after we spend $1 million cleaning up the site, figure out that we didn't do it right. Now we got to spend $5 million cleaning it up all over again. So it's a careful process. And I think one of the beauties of Mott-cuh is that it pretty well spells out like that whole like step-by-step process so that sites go through the same thing and one site doesn't go through this super rigorous process and the other site kind of like, yeah, we cleaned it up, cool. There's mechanisms in there to make sure that they're all cleaned up so that all the exposure routes are eliminated so that humans and the environment aren't exposed to those contaminants. What's the average time? Gosh, so some of these sites, like Cornwall Avenue landfill, for example, if you remember, last time we had some meetings on that, there was, I think, the consultant had, that was one of his first projects, and I think he's, getting ready to, retire. So some of these projects have been going on for, 3 decades, maybe even longer. Some of them are a lot quicker and faster. It really depends on the nature of it. In the rulemaking process, where we're trying to update it, we're trying to figure out, where can we increase those efficiencies and make sure that we're able to get out there and clean them up faster while not losing the integrity of the overall cleanup. So yeah, it's a complicated process for sure. I guess I wanted to, before we move on to hands-on exercise, are there any questions? I also want to make sure there's no questions on the web. Had some great questions.
Is there a spot where we can see what other people have commented on?
Yeah, so my understanding is the comment period is open. You might not be able to see what other people are commenting live, but after each public comment, thank you for bringing this up. So after you submit your comments in the public comment period ends, Ecology then takes all of those public comments, reviews them, and then they address every single comment. And then once they've addressed every single comment and they've, done a fine job of that, then they'll put together a report and send those back out to those who commented. And those are also available electronically through the website so that you can see what people commented on the past.
So something that I've tried to keep doing now is we have the ability to submit your comments online through a comment system, and you can see live when anyone submits something through that online forum that we have. You can see their comments along with your comments if you submit one. So what I'm showing here is a site that's down in the Seattle area, south of Seattle, called the Midway Landfill. Address is in Kent, Des Moines area. That's I-5 that you're seeing in that picture right there. This site, the comment period closed here recently. and I've made it available to still see the comments after it's closed. So all of the comments that are showing up on the screen here are PDF copies of what people commented. You can read through those. As we get to a place of all of those comments, you've responded to those comments. I have the website here ready to provide a link to a document that captures all those comments, and then you see all the responses that Ecology responded ourselves, or in the case of this site, we'll coordinate it with some other agencies to respond. So the link to all of the other comments may go away, but they'll be captured in the response summary, and you'll see all those comments together.
Like online comments, like randomly you all responding.
Yeah, I could have used those words, sorry, wrong there.
Other folks that are reading your comments can't just read them. No, it's not an open forum.
Okay.
Right.
Your public comment, and then Ecology is the one that responds to that comment.
Okay.
You can see the submitted comments, but it's not like that chat forum.
Okay.
Going back.
I think that's getting super nasty.
Nope. Nope. There will often be times where someone has read another comment that has been placed earlier, and they'll reference it. I agree with this person if they provided their name, and second that and further the idea or that concept further. That's fine too. And that's where you have the choice whether you want to submit your comment with your name. You can submit it anonymously if you wish to. All right, so switch. All right, so for our online folks, you'll see a presentation that I'm delivering here, and it will cover the handout that folks are going to see in the room. If you have it, that's great. If not, you'll be able to see how you can have your imagination. You can kind of see if the screen is going to change to what you were going to be asked to do. That'll make sense here in a second. All right. So for this next exercise, the challenge that I have for you all is to see how well you can try your hand at being a manager, site manager. So this kind of fun activity, and it's going to be fun, it simplifies a very complex process down a little bit. So allow a little bit of grace with that simplification. The reason I called this junior manager is because it's a part of an exercise that I'm coordinating with, hey there. Okay, there we go. So Western Washington University, they have a class that's called Mott-cuh, Science Management and Communication of Contaminated Sites. And their professor, Dr. Ruth Sofield, one of the assignments for one work group of that class, where they're studying all about this cleanup process that we learned about tonight. The one group, their communication goal is to create a comic strip that tells the story of how you clean up a site. So you have these superheroes that are trying to clean up a site, and they're trying to battle the evil forces of like contaminants, these villains of contamination. So the playfulness of what you see in some of these slides comes from that comic book approach. And you'll be able to download some of those comic strips. I encourage you to read them. They're just really fun, really well done. I've heard some people say that they're extremely more entertaining and more informative than our fact sheets. They're way more entertaining for sure. So I encourage you to check that out. But that's kind of where this activity fits, is a part of that environmental education activity.
Okay.
And these presentations, we can share them too. You can click on those. Well, they're fine
My
for me.
grandchildren.
Yeah, perfect. The audience for the comic strips, you know, is kind of fit for that middle school, high school, but adults love it too. So that's where the playfulness comes in. So some of you have mentioned, you know, seeing those big white tarps along the site on the waterfront. So that'll be our example, is the Formal Avenue. So I picked that site because it's a little bit further along in our cleanup process. It went through a remedial investigation, feasibility study, had a cleanup action plan created, engineering design report, and it's waiting to kind of for a sister site to catch up in cleanup steps. It'll go out for construction, meaning it'll go up soon. So it's a little bit further along, and you can see, you know, how this process works. So it's a good example. You know, obviously the problem with the landfill, it comes from the name, Cornwall Avenue landfill at the end of Cornwall Avenue that goes through downtown. It dead ends where they used to have a landfill site. So you can see that picture there is, you know, I think the perspective is on Google Earth. That's one island background that you see there. That would just be the foreground that they're creating of a landfill. So obviously something that needs to be cleaned up. The goal for that is to clean it up, be safe and protective of human health and the environment, and use it as a community park. So it would be the Cornwall Beach Park, the goal for that stretch of land. So there's portions of that I believe is referred to as Glass Beach that will, I think that's the upper part that you see there. So the ultimate in land use, that's within the city and port for what they're going to be doing. They have to clean it up based on ecology, Mott-cuh cleanup standard. That's where you're going to get to act as a site manager to get it to that point. As I jump past slides and bug you with. So we know what the past is, and we identify what it is presently, and then what the goal is for the future. Just want to point out one note that is a common misconception for folks is that what is underneath those white tarps is landfill municipal waste, not right immediately underneath those tarps. Those tarps are in place over soil that will be used as a multi-layer cap or the contaminant of the municipal waste that's below you. If you were to stand on the site, the tarps next to you, what would be below your feet is the landfill waste. The tarps that would be at your feet or raised in elevation, that's useful clean soil to be used to be leveled out and moved around, covered. An earlier cleanup had some extra soil, and they didn't want to lose the chance of cleaning up another site, something future site. So they placed it there, put tarps over it so stuff doesn't grow. So yes, deep underneath at the ground level and below those white tarps is the waste. Yes, just immediately underneath the surface of that white veneer, the layer there is something that will be usable. So that's usually something that, just to point out. So our activity sheet. So there's two sides here. We'll walk through a remedial investigation. You'll kind of draw a line on there and see if you, can actually identify where that contamination is. You'll go through and pick a preferred alternative in the feasibility study. You'll line out what happens in the cleanup action plan for this site, and then you will draw and create your engineering design plan. Okay, so I'll step you through it. So here's where we are. At the very beginning, Eleanor and Christian were talking about our initial investigation site hazard assessment. So that often happens when ecology works with other organizations, other agencies, so or public. Somebody can report a spill and they report it to ecology, we respond, discover that there could be more that needs to be cleaned up. So with Cornwall Avenue landfill, the initial investigation discovery of this site, it was a known municipal landfill. So there wasn't necessarily needed to be a you know that this is a site that's logically needs to be cleaned up because it was operational before current landfill management. So that part of the story is a little bit more of a one-to-one logical, how we knew about this site. It was a no-brainer that was going to need to be cleaned up. So, moving on into your worksheet, we're doing a remedial investigation. So what does it look like in real life? The example is you can kind of see here, the blue on the top of your picture is Bellingham Bay. The part that is brown, the bottom of the picture, is upland, dry land, surface, and it's also what's filled by that waste. So that's the landfill. What they did in the remedial investigation, testing. That's the reason you have investigations, trying to find where that contamination is. So pick a spot that you either suspect or you know there's contamination. You just keep moving outward until you don't find any concentrations of that contamination. That's how you define your site boundary. Is you start with where you know it is, you just keep moving out in a search pattern, and when you stop finding it, that's where your site stops. So on your worksheet, you have circles with X's in it. That's typically how a remedial investigation figure will show. These little circles will be coded differently. So give a try on your worksheet, dark ones, and online, if you happen to have your worksheet, feel free to do this. If not, looking at our screen, my next slide, when I click it, will actually reveal a couple different ways that you could have drawn it. But the dark ones, those are monitoring wells representative of that are above cleanup levels, which means they're hot, they're contaminated, need to be cleaned up. The ones that are lighter, not thick, not bold, they're wells that they tested, didn't find anything that would justify the need to clean up. So draw a line on your paper of an outline where you think the site boundary is. Yes? Okay. All right. So make sure here we can keep this interactive as possible online. Okay, so that's a real simple, quick, square drawing. Wouldn't necessarily need to be that way. It could follow the contours a little bit more where you think the wells might be. One thing I point out with this is just to note that our site boundary, as defined by where the contamination is based upon contamination, not property ownership line. So this boundary could include 4 owners, could include 4 different, responsible parties for the cleanup. It's based upon contamination. So, when you try to figure out where a site is, you have to pick an address sometimes. These addresses don't often align with, such and such street and all these different parcels. It just follows where the contamination is. You want to clean up what's dirty, not based upon what's easy. You want to pick out what's complete. So, okay, did you get close? Yeah? Okay. So the next step, you got the RI done. Mind you, RI, remedial investigation feasibility binder, the results can be inches thick, like 4 or 5 inch thick binders. So you just rocketed through your testing, so good job. You're on a good pace. So feasibility study. This is a disproportionate cost analysis, the graph. And what that shows, like Kirsten was filling you in about, is the bars there that have the dark red color is the comparative benefit. So that's the benefit for environment and people in the environment. The purplish bar that is inset, darker maroon, is the estimated cost. And then the lines, as well as with those triangles, is the cost to benefit ratio. So what this means is, and the reason why there's four groupings and for an upland site and 4 options for a marine site is they evaluated different cleanup options for what is up on land, what is down in the water. So some of that contamination is down into the bay. They want to make sure that they take care of what's in water, wet, and what's upland, dry. So they looked at those 2 different areas a little bit separately because cleanup's a little bit. So there's a lot of details in that, but simplifying it, you'll get a chance to do that on the sheet. And you'll notice that this preferred alternative mirrors what that first upland dry option is. It's the same numbers. So every one of those options in up to site is protective of human health and environment. It wouldn't make the cut if it didn't meet those requirements. So in order to be able to figure out how to choose this, I simplified what those alternatives need. So preferred alternative, or the option 1, includes some capping. So they're going to suggest a certain thickness and a certain number of layers. It's going to be 1 layer and another layer, multi-layered capped. That way, if somebody's on the surface, they'll be removed from being exposed to that waste below, contamination below. Second option has more. It can either be thicker caps, more layers, different sort of approach, but they'll just be more. Third option, the most. It's going to be even thicker or even greater number. And the fourth option, in this case, is total soil removal. It means they're going to take out all of the contamination. And you can see where the price spikes. So that dark bar in this case, $53.7 million to remove everything. And option 2, 3, and 4, excuse me, they're in the magnitude of 5 million, 5.7, and 6.9 million. So it's different to cap it versus remove everything. Now, what's interesting to note that bang for your buck, benefit versus cost ratio, how much benefit do you get versus price? That's where those triangles and light dots are. So you can see, in option 1, starts climbing a little bit to option 2, dips down a little bit for option 3. And that benefit for the cost drops down to the lowest, option 4. So in our hypothetical example here, let's say the city has $6 million to be able to contribute for this cleanup. They're eligible for another $6 million. They're eligible for 50% of their cost reimbursement. Let's just say there's a total number of $6 million to do this. Which option would you pick? 2? Right? So you have now understood what a disproportionate cost analysis is. That's pretty much it in a nutshell right there. So that's a part of the feasibility study, is to identify an option. 2. I just want to point out on your worksheet, it says PTA machine. And no, that's like the bad guys talking to the good guys there. The good guys use what they call the disproportionate cost analysis machine to spit out those results. They make that kind of a fun superhero tool. So you're fighting the evil forces right now as we go. So now you've got your remedial investigation done, feasibility study done, the RIFS for the acronym, and now you're ready to take that information and develop a cleanup action plan. So that's what this looks for the Cornwall Avenue landfill. They identified that preferred alternative and added some more information, refined what that plan is going to look like. So in the case of Cornwall, you can see that the green area is multi-layered cap. It's going to have liners, soil, and different layers. What's going to be in the water will be added material, added sand to cap the sediment there. Then it'll be as you go further and further out, there's less and less concentration. They're basically capping everything on land and in the water. So that was that preferred alternative, is that option 2. So I guess I'm kind of filling you in. It's pretty, in this one, pretty straightforward. You know, if you were to pick the preferred alternative, which one did we land on? 2, right? An interesting point to make on that.
I'd say have the money and find the other money.
So therein lies the public participation process. So that's often, you know, a comment that we see is you prefer something that's greater and more protective. Yes, it may cost more. Benefit versus cost ratio. The Model Toxics Control Act defines how you get to that evaluated option, and those rules that are in place guide the work that ecology does, and it guides the work that we ecology are regulating. Yep. There are bounded rules. Eleanor, I really appreciate that she shared at the very beginning of this, the part of changing the rule, advising any adjustments to that rule. If that can be captured and communicated in such a way, welcome to the public comments, adjust and change that rule, then end up with more protective cleanups, and that rule can be followed that way. As it stands now, follow the rule, it ends with those results. That's kind of what has provided the boundary lines for what ecology chooses to do, to therefore require the essentially liable parties to clean it up. What can happen when someone submits a comment, you're submitting it to ecology, but that comment is shared with, it's publicly available and aware of all the other parties that are responsible. They see it. As they're doing their cleanup, it's done in a community mindset. So it's heard. We as ecology say this is what the rule requires you to do, but another responsible party like the port or city or some other entity, they can choose to do a more protective cleanup. They can spend more money if they wish, because that option Mott-cuh requirements, and ecology is like, great, do more protective work. That's wonderful. You can't do less, but you can do more. So your comment, is put into that awareness of what the community is preferring. It still has to fall within that filter of how the rule is designed. But submit the comment, let the interest be known. That's why the public comment period is open. So when I designed this, I was hoping that there would be somebody that would pick another option, because it's a good lesson.
Really, I want number 4, but I know that's not realistic.
In many ways, like if you were to have that towards everyone involved, they're like, if money wasn't an issue, wouldn't it be wonderful to clean up everything to 100% as you can? But that's the permanent to the maximum extent practical. That's words from the law. Practical part is a part of the world. So, but one good thing on the practical part, Eleanor mentioned, is you pick standards as a part of the cleanup action plan. But this goal of this site is to be used as a park. Which would you, what are you designing your standards based on? Community use or industrial? Community use, yep. Which means you have to clean it up as if somebody were to be living on this site, and if somebody were to ingest soil on the site. Like if toddlers were playing on the beach and it would have to be safe for them. Yep.
It might already be.
So in the case of this site here, we have limited access to the site. So not supposed to trespass to be on the site, because it hasn't been cleaned up for that sort of regular use of folks. Right. No, that part is good.
That's what I was thinking. Kids are probably already eating and saying
yep. Nope. People can be there, and that's what it's been cleaned up for. Yep. Yeah. I have a toddler. I know that they would eat anything in their sight. So, yeah, it hits close to home now. So another thing that you do for the cleanup action plan, you've selected your alternative, you've selected your standards, you select the schedule. That's done and bound in the legal agreement. Usually a cleanup action plan is an exhibit of a legal agreement. So, you know, it's bound right into the legal agreement. Those are responsible for carrying this out on the schedule. So, you know, we're 2020 now. What do you think, what's your guess, I should say, on how long it would take to get an engineering design? At this point it has. It will be constructed in tandem with the site that's right next to it, R.G. Haley. So there's two cleanup sites on that little stretch of land. So you're right. It has been done. Engineering design plan has been done. Cornwall, the other site that needs to be done at the same time, so they can do the construction at the same time. How long? I mean, some of this is a bit rhetorical, trying to go back in time for something. How many years?
They have to do an engineering and design report for that other one too before they do the job. And that might take.
Good guess? What do you think?
I put
Yep. So kind of generally thinking a couple years, and then, you know, after an engineering design report is in place, it might be about another year or so after that. The way in which the schedules are written into the cleanup action plan, you have, you know, a certain time that you have to have this step completed, and then you would have a certain amount of time that ecology has to review it before then it goes out to the public. So it lines up trigger points. They have like 90 days to get something done, and another 90 days for it legally kind of keeps things. So this is kind of more of an exercise for you all as a site manager to be like, this is what we aim for. Ultimately work with your attorneys to get it captured. So it's just more of a kind of an exercise to kind of guess and ballpark figure when things would be. But legally, there is actual date. So then in the cleanup action plan, it also lines out how often the site will be monitored. That's set at the beginning before they ultimately get it. So how often do you think a site would be monitored?
Presentation, like, seeing that there's people going to be living on it,
Yep. So in every 5 years would be a periodic review of every year's worth of testing. So yeah, it's done regularly, and then, you know, reported on every 5 years. So there's work reports that are submitted to site managers on a more frequent basis out there for public. So ongoing process. What's also interesting is when you're setting this at the cleanup action plan phase, you have an expectation of what it's going to need to be monitored. They build that into the engineering design, knowing where the monitoring will make sure that they can be done well, with a good location to test. It's easier to do that too, because they know they're going to just have to do it regularly. So plan for it. It would be inside and outside. Same logic of when they did the remedial investigation. Same logic applies for afterward. You want to make sure that what you know is staying in place for how it's been planned to keep it in place. And you also want to make sure that it's not, that for some reason something didn't work and spreading. Make sure you know both. Going as planned and didn't go anywhere. You know, that's one of those built-in checkpoints that you have a periodic review that finds that everything's good, that's pretty straightforward. If something's found to deal with, you got to go back or make sure the contamination is addressed. So that's why the owner and Chris said they want to get it right the first time. Want to get it right the first time, if you don't have to go back and do it again for anybody's. And then another part of the cleanup action plan is what does maintenance look like. So who will maintain and operate this site, meaning you've got to clean up in place to keep it functioning that way. So what do you think in this case? Okay, and so we've got one person saying ecology. Think. So in this case, you're right. Well, sort of. It's the city that will be operating the city park. The port had some interactions of ownership with this site, but really it'll be a city site after this. So it'll be a parks department, or the city parks department. So ecology. So when they have a finished park operating, that some things like regular maintenance of keeping this facility running, maintaining the care of the lawn, which is one layer of the cap, that soil layer at the very top. If storm surge comes in, sort of storm event, and it was designed to have riprap rock on the shoreline, and the storm moves some of that riprap rock, they have to go back and put it in place. That's part of the protective design. Regular park maintenance and cleanup site. Exactly. Yep. So they do that, and ecology regulates, but it's really, that's land use operation. You just got to make sure they keep that function plan. Okay, so we've moved all the way through, got our engineering design in place. Now we're working towards, so we have our cap in place, I should say. Now we're actually going to work on that detailed design. So you're going to draw a landfill gas collection on here. And I'll show you what that looks like here in a second. And you'll also place, you have the bin with the handouts there, Post-it notes in there. Those are actually, believe it or not, part of this activity. So the one of each. Yeah, I guess that would work too. So part of this plan is, one, you have to create some sort of multi-layer system to remove exposure to the waste, the contamination. People above the surface need to be removed from actually touching and getting into it. But a landfill creates methane gas, off gases as it breaks down. That's standard for landfills. So you want to collect that gas and move it away and safely disperse that. If you ever driving past another landfill that's active, you'll see at certain times at night that they may have a pipe that ignites some methane gas, like a torch at nighttime firing. Some landfills will recirculate that gas and use that methane for another operation of the facility. Depends on how they've been oriented. But that's a byproduct of the landfill breaking down its gas. So this is no exception to that. They just safely collect it and move it away. So here's what a kind of design would look like. So cross section, you've got pipes that run in a grid pattern throughout your site. Collects it, then there's different parts of the site that will extract that and then off-gas it. Or in this case, there's energy plants that use that to generate more energy. The fuel source to create energy. Not going to be creating energy from the Cornwall site because it's older. It's not going to be as much gas to do anything like that from. The landfills get older, they produce less and less. Good news, but they still want to make sure that it's safe. So here's, start your brain thinking on how you want to draw that onto your site. Okay, so you know your boundaries. I want to give another go on defining where that outer boundary is. And then inside of that site, think, dream up what your grid might look like. Yeah. Whatever extent artistic you'd like to have fun. Not expecting break out your protractors. There'll be no grading on any artistic ability in this whatsoever. Or if you all like gold stars, I can give you that. How are you following online so far? Are you being able to see everything?
Yep.
So how are we doing in here in class? Good? E-class, workshop. We're all in a class setting. Got some? Okay. All right, so I'll click here next. This is only what I dreamt up. So, you know, you have some sort of a grid pattern, and it eventually has to be collected and pulled from. In the case of our site, we will you'll see little pipes that will off the fringes of the park, and they will also test what that flow looks like too. Once it's off-gassed out into the open atmosphere, there's no, and it will be minimal at that point. So they collect that safely as part of the design. Okay, so next up is we need to create some sort of a multi-layer capping system. So that's done with layers of soil, like what's underneath those white tarps. It's also done with things that are impermeable, meaning the water can't go through it. So if you think, you know, about this site, you want to limit groundwater going through contaminated stuff and then flowing downhill into Bellingham Bay. Rain's here, so you got to accommodate rain hitting this site and doing something. So the reason that you have a layer that water can't move through it is you want to keep rain from the sky hitting the ground, going through a clean pathway in the ground that would ultimately end up in Bellingham Bay, limiting any water going into the contamination. So in your multi-layer system, you want to have something that water doesn't move through. You can have another part, you plant things like grasses, shrubs, trees. The other benefit of having something that's like that layer is, say for some reason somebody wanted to go through and dig something deep and build a structure. All of a sudden you've started to cut through with your excavator shovel and get something that's not earthen material. It's kind of meant to also be a, hey, whoa, there's something below this that you can take note of. Contamination below the ground. So kind of serves a couple of purposes. Sometimes those covers might have a non-natural color to it, to alert, workers with that too. You should already know if they're contacting ecology before, but extra safeguard redundancy there. So the next thing is do that yourself. So you've got Post-it notes, and place those Post-it notes over. You can label what you want each of those layers to be if you wish. You can say one layer is going to be gravel, one layer is going to be soil, one layer is going to be plastic. And what logic would you place those orders in? Meaning what's going to be whatever you place first is going to be lower. Whatever you place second is going to be a little bit closer to the ground surface. What you place third is going to be closest to people. So the graphic I have doesn't have anything labeled on there. I'm kind of curious what did you end up, or did you put things in? So what was the one that's closest to the gas collection system? What's the furthest one down? Plastic, okay. What was above it? Gravel? What's above that? Yeah. So what's your logic in that? I agree. Sounds great. What do you think? That's a cleanup site too. It was managed the same way that Cornwall, their sort of capping system. Yep, spot on. And with having vegetation up top, soil, gravel, some sort of that layering system, you're working with nature, that groundwater before it hits something that would ultimately downward into the bay. So, design. Plastic, gravel, soil. Plastic, soil, and soil, and soil. You can have different thicknesses, different types of soil. In the case of Cornwall, there's fill material, certain granularity that will be placed in soil, plastic. They're even adding more to that. So I simplified it. You understand the thought process for sure. I can tell, but they're even doing it more actual real world. All right, so you've got your plan in place. It sounds so simple to just say, go do it, but that's what's next. Carry it out, clean it up. There's a symbol there of a crane. It will look like construction sites. In this case, you're adding something to the site. You're not necessarily you're adding the capping layer system. In some cases, some sites can be dredging. You're actually putting something into water, pulling out contaminated sediment, barging it, and trucking it away. But they'll feel like construction sites. So we use that word construct. It doesn't always mean you're proactively adding something, and you're subtracting something. You're chemically changing something. But an action takes place. You've got a site that's cleaned up. You begin your monitoring. You engage those controls on the site. How are you going to use it safely? And then community to enjoy. So that's kind of the process in a nutshell. And this is what the city's plans are for the park in the future. The open grassy area, you see the white tarps currently. The parking lot to the right of this image, closer to downtown, to orient you. To the right of the image is going down downtown. To the left of the image is closer to Boulevard Park. The parking lot area is what we call the R.G. Haley site. That's another contaminated site. Had some different contaminants there they had to deal with, which is why they're two sites. But they're both getting ready to have their engineering design in place. Sign a legal agreement called a consent decree. Finds out what that final cleanup looks like and put that together. Future ever. So you're saying to the right of this image?
If you were going down Cornwall, before you bring it last feed, are you talking about? Yeah.
Here?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. As far as this cleanup site goes, and ultimately that's the city's call for land use, but it's off the property of what we managed as the cleanup site. Those aren't a part of the actual managed cleanup site. Yeah.
I know whatever found I've noticed, I think they have which is great. It's good fun for them.
And you can see, at least the city's plan of how they lined it out, labeled as, you probably can't read it from there, but existing commercial building, adjacent parking. So they're not planning on moving that building. It's part of the plan as it is here. So, well done, site managers. You went through your step even at the very end of a workshop. So you've endured. And how we have clean park. So, but unfortunately, your work is not done for Cornwall Avenue. As this site continually is used, developed, and you as the site manager are still the point of reference keeping it clean. So when the potentially liable parties and the ecology manages this cleanup, those restrictive covenants of how the site can be used is tied to the deed of the land. So whoever purchases this land in perpetuity going forward into the future has to abide by and know that this is a site and it has to be kept clean and functional this way. So it's a city's own site here, so they're managing it. If they were to sell it someday in the future, hypothetically, if they were tied to the land that has, that's where anybody would ask that question of whoever was the site manager responsible for the future. So if all you doesn't kind of really check out, we're always kind of there as far as making sure it stays clean. And the community, as their part, makes sure that they let us know if they see anything. So that's why it's a community approach.
So it's running a little late. Thanks for bearing with us. Like, that was good.
8:08.
Yeah, 8:10. I know I'm getting tired. It's getting close to my bedtime. So thank you for sticking around. So next time we're going to meet at the Ecology Building, but we'll also have the WebEx option.
Hey.
It up for questions too at the end, but I just kind of wanted to do some closing remarks so that if you want to take off, that's fine. So please fill out those surveys too. And for the comments, if there's things like that you learned that you were surprised by, or things that weren't covered that you really wish were covered, please let us know, or anything we can do different to help you guys better understand things, or you're happy we covered something but like you still were really confused by it. Let us know so that we can better help you guys in the future. So another next step is that I will send you guys an email with